for me, it's always been about finding underrepresented or undervalued people and providing what I describe as scaffolding, not structure. How do I provide an environment for you to thrive in that? How do I give you the confidence? How do I create the opportunities through my network? We don't talk enough about what we want out of life, in our working life. Why not? I only ever do three things. And I describe it in a very British way, which is kind of, it's a bit Mr. Bean.
Hi Toby, thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Really excited to obviously have this conversation, to understand more from your perspective around growth, the challenges, how to best approach it. I think before we get into it, it would be really good to just have a bit of background like into yourself,
Sure.
Your career, just so that kind of understand where you've learned everything that you've learned today.
How I've ended up, where I've ended up. Yeah, okay, so yeah, it's been an interesting, I guess, career to this point. So I run a company called Renew, which is focusing on scale up and growth in AI for healthcare, private equity and tech firms. But I've had a bit of an interesting background in that I've run large tech corporates and I've done startups, and I love both. And I find that the tools for growth are actually really similar in both environments. And my career's gone in a bit of a wave where I've gone big company, small company, big company, small company, whereas most people either do one thing or the other. And I think it's a really interesting time now with some of the growth around AI, where there's a lot of hype around AI at the moment, as everybody knows, but when are we going to see the growth and when are we going to use it for tools for growth? And that's kind of, I think, what my career has led me to this point. So it's great to have this conversation, and it's great to work with you and your team in terms of finding fantastic talent for this sort of stuff. So
it's an interesting one because you hear like a lot of conversations, and I think we've had quite a lot of chats around this recently, where there's so many conversations that are AI led, and everybody's so keen to talk about it, but there isn't as of yet many like business cases within successful business cases where people have actually used AI to grow or to kind of improve efficiency. But I know when we've kind of spoken in the past, it's probably been something that you've been working with for quite some time. So it would be good to know probably like the background into that and what you've taken away from it.
Well, it's a great point. I mean, we're at this point now where everybody's looking at AI through the generative AI lens, and the business cases are still being built out there. There's a number of them around productivity and stuff. But AI has been with us for a long time. I was with one of my favourite data engineers, data scientists the other day, who was kind of a PhD in NLP like 30 years ago. And he said to me, and he works on a pig farm down in Wiltshire, and he said, it's all cool again now, right? So it's kind of, it's been around for a while, and a lot of things have been driving businesses. So I think we've got really good at driving and understanding business cases for new technology. But there have only been a couple of periods in my career where the technology like changes everything, changes organizations, changes talent, changes skills. And that whole digital thing was one, which we're still living in, right? So I describe AI as the fourth wave of digital. The first wave being sort of digital marketing, and then you had e-commerce, and you had mobile and customer experience, and now we're into AI as a fourth wave of transforming. And it's transforming everything, right? So there's not an element of life that is not being transformed in some way, about how we socialize, where we go, how government works, the brands that we engage with, everything. So I've had the kind of privilege and misfortune of seeing it through that whole cycle. And I think this is just that latest wave of it. But I think it's really interesting how it's going to change talent, how it changes organization structures, and how we embrace it. And for me, the big question is how do we all drive growth businesses by using AI effectively, both as a product to market, but also in the operations of the business and in developing talent as well.
And I speak to a lot of businesses now where they obviously are very aware that AI is there. It's something that's been spoken about a lot more now because of obviously the rise of Gen AI and the buzz that's going around, but they just have like no idea where to start, what to do, how to best utilise it. So what kind of advice would you give to those kind of businesses?
The AI advice. I mean, what the world is not short of is AI advice right now. What the world is short of is great AI. I guess I've had a bit of a lot of foundational experiences that kind of give an answer to that. So everybody, first let me say what I think people are doing right now. Right, so everybody's doing a pilot. Everybody's got a little pilot with Gen AI, or they're having a little sandbox, play around with it, or they're developing products. Not many people are deploying as product in market.
Yeah.
The other thing, finally, that is really starting to get some traction, which goes in the category of boring but important. And sorry to the data engineers out there, but I'm looking at it from a consumer point of view. But people are really starting to understand the value of unlocking their data and making their data accessible and open to build generative solutions on top of it, or build small language models or whatever it may be. And then the third thing I think hasn't started yet, but is going to start, is for those people who remember GDPR, the impact of the EU AI Act, which is the world's first real regulation in AI, is going to make everybody think about how they run their organisations and run the AI systems, both they're giving to their customers, but also in the operations of their business. And that hasn't happened, that hasn't started yet, but we're going to go into a period where everybody's got to kind of work that out. So those things that are starting to happen, I think they're really, really foundational and really important, actually. So yeah, absolutely, everybody should be playing around and trialing about new revenue models, new products for market, how you can change the way. For example, my favourite one is how you can change proposal writing. I mean, who likes writing proposals, right? Yeah. We all want to be out with the customers, but to do that, you need really good data on your historical proposals and what's won, and that needs to be accessible. So things like that, I think there's some really good trials going on out there, but it touches every different area of business as well as different products. But this thing around how you're going to govern AI is really, really important. And I was super fortunate a few years back to come up with some of the first responsible AI frameworks and deployments in Europe, and I was kind of doing it in association with a firm that was working with Microsoft, and that was because, as ever, Europe is always gets a little bit more excited about regulation than America, which means we can sometimes take a bit more of a balance view. So those are some of the areas.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, it does. It's really interesting, and I think it's just that kind of where to start piece. Obviously, it's something that a lot of businesses are looking into at the moment, but can feel quite overwhelmed with what should you be considering, like what are the factors that you need to really kind of hone on.
So just to answer that bit, I think there's three things that people should do right now, which are actually boring foundational things. I say boring, but they're foundational. One is they need to understand what AI they're using in their business already. So they kind of, I worked with business back in 2012, 2014. We were building quite advanced AI systems then, not as advanced as the systems now, but they need to understand that they're using data to make predictive, adaptive, deterministic decisions, probabilistic decisions that are automated, right? So they need to understand what they're doing and need to understand the risk that's got for the organisation. They then need to work out what their policy is, right, and what trade-offs. So one of the big things that people really need to understand about how they're using AI is its impact on diversity, discrimination, and those type of things, right? So, there are things like, various different computer vision models were, are better tuned to certain ethnic groups, recognising faces and others. I was talking to a woman from an insurance company a couple of weeks back. Insurance companies' business is making, decisions, probabilistic decisions that are in some way discriminatory, right? That's how they kind of work. When you expose that to a full set of AI systems and data and automate it, then it can go a bit further. So I think there's a lot of that stuff that needs thinking through, so not to rush into it, and what the policies will be around that. And then the final bit is around what the process is. And this, I think, is the hardest bit, because you're really talking about changing the organisation. Like how are you going to train, how are you going to test, how are you going to accredit, how are you going to make sure that you've got humans in the loop, making sense. So all of that is kind of foundational stuff. On one side of it, it's kind of the boring bit of AI. I mean, thanks for bringing Toby on a podcast and making AI sound really boring. But so that's all the boring bit of AI. But then the other bit is then what can you do with it? What can you do with your customers? How can you change the customer experience? How can you innovate with new products? And then the third bit is what can you do to make your processes and systems better? Everybody talks about productivity, but practical things for me like billing processes or proposal writing is my favourite, because if you said to any CEO out there, do you know what, with this tool we can write 2 times the number of proposals with a 20% better win rate, who wouldn't do that? Right? And I think that's the kind of thing this technology can do. But to get those results, you've got to take those steps and make sure it's all planned and done properly in the first place. Yeah. So, long answer, but hopefully that gives you the stuff.
It definitely does, and I think everybody's always so quick to jump on the exciting parts, right? But the not so exciting parts, as you mentioned, are equally, if not more important. You have, factors that you have to consider initially to make sure that you're implementing it in the best way. And if we're kind of looking back on your career, I'd say one thing that you've done incredibly well is obviously growth and the ability to effectively grow businesses. I say one thing, one of many things. And
kind of the thing they all want, right? They all want the growth.
And it's something that is can be very challenging in very different ways for a lot of businesses. It would be really interesting to understand, given your experience within that space and the kind of success rate across a variety of businesses, what the most important factors are to consider when you're looking to grow a business. It would be great to kind of walk through that.
Yeah, growth is it's also one of those funny ones, isn't it? Because everybody sets out for growth, but then it's quite intangible. So how do you define it? For me, I found now what is my formula of growth, right? Because I've done it now 4 or 5 times, and I keep going back to the same things, the same growth tools or levers. But it's not because I set out to grow. I mean, my favourite one, and where you and I connected and hit it off, and your firm and everything else, is around talent. And for me, that has always been the biggest and single source of growth. But kind of everybody says that. So what do you mean, and what do you do differently, and how do you do it? So for me, it's always been about finding underrepresented or undervalued people and providing what I describe as scaffolding, not structure. Right? So not telling people this is where you sit in the organisation structure, and this is what you should do, and who moved my cheese, and all that kind of stuff. It's more of a case of what do you want to do, what's your passion, and how can I provide an environment for you to be great, and how can I for you to thrive and have the confidence to do that. And for me, it's the most rewarding thing about doing my job, right? Whatever form, big organisation, small organisation, and it doesn't matter whatever different type of talent it is, that then pays growth rewards 10 times over. So for me, it's talent. Everybody says that, and somebody asked me this the other week. I've got a whole bunch of weird and wonderful stories about talent, because I tend to do things that are common sense is not common, right? But to me, they're common sense, and it's all about the individual and providing them the right opportunity. So for me, number one is how do I get amazing people, give them tremendous opportunities, provide them scaffolding, not structure, and let them thrive.
What do you mean scaffolding, not structure? Can you dive into
that
a bit more?
Yeah, so structure would be, and I think the whole recruitment corporate world works like this, right? We all look for job adverts. I mean, and the job advert lists out, this is what you'll do, these are the skills you need, this is how you've got to do it, and then you go for an interview, and somebody assesses you against competencies and values, and that's kind of, for me, that's structure. That's serious structure, and the world works with structure. I prefer to work with scaffolding. So I prefer to understand what somebody's individual passion is, right? So your passion might be for podcasts, or your passion might be for relationships, or it might be for, it might be for money. It might, find out what that is and have a really honest conversation about it and go, right, okay, let's achieve together. How do I provide an environment for you to thrive in that? How do I give you the confidence? How do I create the opportunities through my network? How do I help you develop skills? How do I give you feedback in a way that might be quite strong, but it's all with the same mindset.
Yeah.
I don't see many people do that.
Yeah.
I see people go, right, here's what the book says, and here's how you should manage it and all the rest of it. And, you know, this is, if you do this and do this and do this, then in 2 years you might get promoted to one of these. I don't care about job titles. I really don't care. And I don't care about pay bands and all that sort of stuff. I care about people and them achieving what they want to achieve. And if I can provide the support for that, then great. I have a very honest conversation that says, look, let's create wealth together, then let's create value and let's share in that wealth. And I think that's a very honest and open way of doing it, rather than saying, no, you've got to work 40 hours a day or whatever it is and I'm going to get the benefit. I don't think it's authentic.
Yeah.
So for me, I've always found it that way. It's not always worked, and I've had some proper clangers along the road, real clangers. But that, in my core, that's how I work.
Yeah.
And, you know, whether you talk about one of my recent businesses, which is a startup that did really well, called Pivot, that, you know, we grew to about 25, 30 people, 16 nationalities, 19 languages, people from all over the world. And we basically said to them, like, okay, you define your own, what do you want to earn? When do you want to be promoted? And we said, right, okay, let's create an environment in the business that delivers you what you want. And somebody wants to really meet, they're only, you know, in their early 20s, wants to meet a chief medical officer of a global biopharma firm. And we put them within a few weeks in a meeting with that and one of the head guys, or three of the head guys in AI from Amazon around the world, right? And I sat in the room with them, they led the meeting, but that's kind of what I mean about scaffolding, not structure.
Yeah.
And it comes from, and I'm sorry, I'm going on about this, but you can tell I'm quite passionate about it. It comes from, you know, I guess a confidence that it's about great people doing great things together, and that's how you drive growth. It sounds a bit glib, but what I don't see is people having the confidence to say, I want you to be great, and then I want to be honest about, if you're great, then we'll be great together and we'll share in that, and that's a good value exchange.
Yeah.
So that's my philosophy on talent overall, and has led me to do weird and wonderful things like Indian mums supporting green screen technology for the world's banks, and me marking out with gaffer tape, walks to the coffee machine for neurodiverse talent. I mean, literally all sorts of stuff. And I love it.
Yeah.
And it's the best thing for growth. But that's probably about 5 minutes on just talent.
It's so interesting, and I think it's something that I think a lot of people forget, that we are people. And I think in the business world, and I have a lot of like podcasts or people that I'm working with that are really struggling with you know, transformations, because they just can't bring people on the journey. But when you like kind of take a step back and you're looking in, like, you know, leaders don't really know much about their team. They don't really, you know anything about, you know, the people that they're working with and what their drivers are. And I think if you don't have that kind of you know, that relationship with those people, like, how can you ever like drive them and push them to achieve like amazing things? Like, you can push people really hard and they might achieve in the short term, but that's not something that's kind of sustainable, and you won't ever be able to grow like longer term if you haven't built that kind of correct like philosophy. So it is.
Yeah, you said something really interesting there, Daisy, which is also what I hear is common. Bring people on the journey. Like, there are people who are there and they're waiting to go on a journey. It's like, but none of us are like that. We've all got our own. We don't talk enough about what we want out of life in our working life. Why not?
Yeah.
Right. So it's not how do you go on my journey with me. It's how do I understand and respect your journey?
Yeah.
How do we create it together and have fun doing it together?
Yeah.
Right? For me, that's the whole mindset is around that, and that I can only be successful by creating a network that works like that.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, some people work like that, other people don't. But yeah, for me, talent, all day long.
Do you also find that it
Number
gives
one.
people more space to be creative in like the ways that they work as well? Like, you know, like you say, like build, like scaffolding, not building. Is it the same approach in terms of the way that they operate, and like, I guess that kind of level of trust that you have with those people based on the relationships, so they can kind of work more like effectively and more efficiently?
Yeah, I think that's right. There's some really interesting, I mean, I'd love to work with a psychologist in terms of looking into this in more detail. I mean, funny enough, I think the reason I'm here and that you and I have met and hit it off is because your firm has the same philosophy, right? And that's not common. I know it's not common. So it's really great to find similar, minded people on the journey. I think, to your question, I do think people are more creative, but people also get scared.
Yeah.
So I said to, and I sometimes push the boat out too far. So I said to a young woman a few years ago, she was super ambitious, she was brilliant. And I said, why don't you set up your own business? And I said, tell you what, we've got all the infrastructure here to set the business up. You go do your thing. We'll incubate it within the business, which is the best way for you to start. And then, as and when you're ready, you spin it out and do whatever you want. And she got scared by that. It was a bit too much.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've noticed that, I will always place it out there as, hey, you probably haven't even thought that this is possible, but I'm going to put it there as something that's potentially possible. I think people can be more creative, can feel more comfortable. I think sometimes people can feel uncomfortable in the challenge. And it's something I've got to learn a bit more, because I like that place of uncomfortableness, if that's a word, because I think that also drives growth, right? It's never settled. I've never made it, it doesn't matter. But not everybody's like that.
Yeah.
So it has to be a space for people to be, they just want to be a bit more comfortable about stuff.
Yeah.
So but I definitely work better with people who want to thrive in that environment. I've had some disasters as well. I've had a load of disasters, where I've had people who have really, and it's particularly become prevalent in social media kind of age as well, where people who want to make the whole thing about them and their narrative and story, he says, doing a podcast. And that's been quite corrosive, and that's quite hard to manage, because it's almost like you're going too far on that approach. Yeah. I've also had a lot of backlash from a load of people who don't do things this way and like the more structure. And it's like, what are you doing breaking rules here and there and everywhere? And I don't see it as breaking rules. I think it's about being decent and honest and authentic with people and giving them opportunity. Yeah. So people do grow, but I'm, as I get a bit older and a lot grayer, I guess I realise that, not everybody's in the same.
Yeah, it's kind of like pivoting for different people and having like different approaches for different people. But I think there's like that link between, as you know your team personally, you know what drives them, you know what route they want to go down. I think having a relationship that's built like that, it then just builds that like psychological safety where they feel like they can like experiment or try new ideas. Right. And I think when you build that kind of culture, that's when growth really like kind of fosters, because I think when people start to be more like innovative and try, obviously that's not the case always, but I can only refer back to like working here, for example, and having like the freedom to do podcasts and like the opportunity of growth that allows for me. But I might not have felt as confident to suggest an idea like that if I didn't have those kind of relationships with like the leaders in the business. So I think it's like it all intertwines, but it's an interesting one. And I think probably on the flip side of things, as you say, like talent is the most important thing. Like, have you ever seen like any or have you got any examples to share of things that haven't worked very well? Or kind
loads.
of, there's the do's and then there's the don'ts.
Yeah,
like,
loads.
What are the don'ts?
Don't hire too many of the same type of people. I've definitely had situations with tall poppy syndrome, where you kind of, one person feels like they can, start to lord it over others. That situation I described around people making it about themselves is really corrosive. And to address that quickly, I tell you one that I'm seeing recently actually is, don't keep thinking there's somebody better. So this is, I'm going to remain nameless, but, you know, I've seen this a couple of times where they've got organisations where that person hasn't worked after, they're a really good person, really good CV, really good background, really, you know, great. They haven't worked. Like there's a bit of tissue rejection in the organisation, or they've taken them a while to settle down. So sometimes they make the decision too quickly. Sometimes you have to make the decision quickly, but then they go back out to market. You're not going to like this one because this is anti-recruitment. And
I'll just edit this bit.
yeah, it's fine. And so they go and hire another, you know, really expensive person, or a more expensive person. And what I've sometimes found is that actually you really should always know who your next gen talent is in your business, because sometimes it's more about the cultural fit or the understanding about how your business operates is much more valuable than the experience outside. The other thing that people don't do enough of, right, and I think they should use firms like yours more, plug, massive, unashamed plug, they don't do talent pooling.
Yeah.
Like, we've got all the tools now. Who do you want to work with? I know who I want to work with. I don't know if they want to work with me, but I know who I want to work with. So when I need a role, I'd much rather go and find one of the people I want to work with than all of the rigmarole of writing the job spec and is it the right job spec and the job's never the job spec and all that kind of stuff. I just would much rather network the talent. And I think one of the things your firm does really well is it brings talent and people looking for talent together. Mm-hmm. And that's the essential bit. So I think there's some of those are really good things. Other things are disasters are when you've created too many roles. So I've offered somebody a couple of grand more on a salary you've had to do to get them in. So we've created a senior this, and which is a different job to just like you know, there's job A and then there's a senior job A, there's job B and there's a senior. And then you end up with junior, senior, middle, and it becomes really corrosive because people start going, well, why are they a junior and I'm a senior? And all that kind of stuff. That doesn't work. And I think that creates hierarchy, which is not helpful.
So do you think you're better hiring at the same level?
No.
Across the board?
No, I think you should have a real respectful view, right? So, this is a really important point on talent. And I tend not to, it's a real shame, but I tend not to talk about diversity anymore because there's a lot of it that's become... it's become into causes and weaponized, and I fundamentally believe in creating diverse teams and organizations, but I do it from a slightly different perspective. So I want diversity of thought. I want, for me, the whole thing with talent is valuing the whole individual. So that's skills and lived experience, right? So I'm not just hiring a CV, I'm hiring skills and lived experience. And to represent anybody's customers, you have to be as diverse as they are. Right, so if your customers have got a certain lived experience, you have to have that lived experience in your team. It doesn't matter if it comes with the A's and B's and whatevers of wherever. So for me, that's about the level of diversity, and that does mean you stretch. You know, you look for across the whole scope of society for people to come in and perspectives and mindsets. So you don't have to agree on everything. And in fact, I love not agreeing. I don't want to agree. And what a lot of people do is they hire people who think like them.
Like-minded people, yeah.
So hopefully it's coming across in this podcast. I really like people who are growth-minded, who have passion and purpose, but they don't all have to think the same, far from it, or have the same background, the opposite. And that creates a really dynamic environment. And then if you can agree to disagree on certain things, right, I don't have the same view on politics or football or whatever it may be, but we're going to be respectful and do this, then I think that works really, really well. Where the opposite has been true, it hasn't worked well.
Yeah.
Because it is quite what I'm talking about is quite a brave approach. It's like, hey, bring your whole self to work, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But we're going to do it in a kind of certain manner.
Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of the events that we've done, especially around DEI, there's always a kind of debate that comes up, which is hire for potential or hire for like what you need to hire for, and there's always like a 50-50 split between that kind of topic around, you know, if you're hiring for potential for diversity purposes, then your team isn't going to be effective because you're missing potential skills in somebody else that might not tick that. the box from a diverse standpoint, but they're going to be able to come in and hit the ground running from day one. And there's always this kind of like face off between like what the best approach is and like what to do. And I always find it kind of like really fascinating, because I think if you never kind of give people that opportunity to grow and to really demonstrate, then I feel like you're missing out such a kind of big trick. And I just always find that kind of a real interesting topic of conversation, and we find it a lot of the time with our clients where we have to kind of like educate them on that topic and kind of to push them down that route of, you don't need to necessarily find someone that ticks every single box or find people like you, because then there's not ever going to be anything different. Say for example, a client has like a pair programming interview and they don't like the approach because that's not what they follow, then they're never going to do anything different, and they're not going to be able to approach challenges in different ways. And I feel like it's sometimes it's just kind of like allowing people to be more open-minded, right, and having like a change in perspective, which can just dramatically like change the direction of the business.
I totally agree. I mean, hearing you say ticking boxes, it's like, stop ticking the boxes. Yeah. Because for me, it comes back to this point about valuing the whole person, skills and lived experience. And then the reflection is, who do you want your customers to be? And everyone, the whole society. So then you have to reflect, you have to understand your customers, and that you have to have those skills and lived experiences. People spend all their time valuing skills, not lived experiences. Yeah. Right? And that is as important if you're creating a marketing campaign. I mean, it's obvious, right, in a marketing campaign. If you're creating pricing, if you're looking at what we're just talking about then, if you're talking about the policies around AI, right, you need to understand lived experiences as well as some of the technical aspects. What we've got is a culture that overvalues certs and qualifications and undervalues lived experiences when we're building solutions and products and we're trying to drive growth. And those areas that people are in people's blind spots, they are the growth points. They're the niches where you can outperform your competitors because other people don't do them. So for me, there's a direct link behind all of that and the market and where you can drive out performance and growth. Yeah. But it's a different mindset. It is a different mindset.
And it's tough because people like themselves, right? And it's always the way, so it's a challenge. And outside of talent, obviously I know that's the most important.
50 minutes on talent.
What other factors do you look at, are important to consider to make sure that you get it right?
So for me, I've done, the story goes, and you've heard me say this before, I only ever do three things. And I describe it in a very British way, which is kind of, it's a bit Mr. Beanie. It's like, it's a weird and wonderful talent, number one, we've talked about that. Number two is I describe it as all the buzzwords. And what all the buzzwords means is advanced tech. And really, in all seriousness, it's around AI and various forms of AI today. So leveraging super advanced technology to drive growth. And then the third one, which I'm sure we'll come on to, which is less interesting, but more valuable often, is corporate development. So I do those three things together. And what it delivers is it delivers massive outperformance in terms of growth. And it's always profitable growth as well. I'm an old-fashioned guy, not so interested in just growth without the bottom line profit. It's got to be both together. But in the AI side, it's really then about applying that, as we start at the top of the call, top of the pod, to the products going to market, as well as the operations of the business. So I give you a really simple example, which doesn't get talked about enough, proposal writing. If we do apply generative AI and we have good data about our winning proposals and what it looks like, we can churn out 2 to 3 times more proposals. They can be really tailored to our customers, and our win rate can be higher. Why would you not do that? Right. So that's just an internal application of it. An external application of it in terms of the product would be, I'll give you an example of a pharma client I was working with who they do clinical trials, they research new drugs, but the drugs that they research are really hard to test on humans. They only do clinical trials on a small number of hospitals around the world. So by using a generative approach called synthetic data, we can generate more data of greater diversity of patient population, which can accelerate their clinical trial development, which can reduce the costs and increase the speed to market of new drugs. Right? So one is an external, different product to market with AI. One is an internal, how you can make your business quicker with AI. So, I mean, the clinical trial one is like 30% cheaper, quicker, right? I mean, that changes the game. And the proposal one is pretty significant too. So those are just two really quick examples of how this unbelievable technology we're working with can be applied to drive growth.
Yeah.
But it's not waving my arms around going, well, I am waving my arms around, but I'm in a podcast studio. So it's not saying AI. It's about, right, okay, we can change our way that we address the market like this, and we can change how we do business like that. And really that will drive exponential performance, which drives the growth.
Yeah.
So for me, that's always, and yeah, it's AI now. I'm an old lag of AI. I've been doing AI since 2012, 2010 maybe. And probably if you go back into predictive digital marketing earlier than that, but there always has been advanced tech on that sort of thing. So if you're looking at, marketing automation back in the day, or looking at programmatic media, or you're looking at, Internet of Things, or looking at, customer experience focused development with DevOps, those type of things always offer those type of growth activities. And I've done all of those, but really my love is about data, AI, and building systems that can address mass audiences, but doing so in a responsible manner with good approaches. So for me, that's the massive growth lever. They probably are in order of my passion for them. So talent 1, AI 2, and then the third one is corporate development, and that's a bit of one of these wishy-washy words. What does that actually mean? Really what it means is business strategy. It means mergers and acquisitions. It means divestments, which is the carve out of old bits of businesses, investment, and then cost reduction. So all of that together, people don't do it. So there's a special team that sit near a CEO that dress weirdly and hang out in Mayfair. They do the corporate development, right? And nobody knows what they do, but every now and again they buy a company or sell something. For me, you have to do that yourself. If you've got a feel for the market, you have to be in the market. We're doing this in, kind of on the edges of Shoreditch, right? So my first office was on Great Eastern Street. I won't tell you when, years ago. You have to know the businesses. You have to know the people. No corporate development suit knows that. You have to have the feel for the individuals. And that's different. That comes from knowing the talent, and it comes from knowing the tech. So I guess why I've been a bit different is I've been able to do the three things together. Mm-hmm. And not many people do. It's like there's a guy who does that, there's a person who does that, there's whatever. I do the three things together, and that's kind of relatively unique, and that's what drives the growth.
And so with corporate development, would you say that has to be more of a centralised function, or it has to be more of a skill that leaders can adopt?
It's a mindset. I think great business leaders are always looking for an angle, and they're always looking for an opportunity. So I met a guy this week who I last met 15 years ago, who's got a small AI business. He's a really good guy in Ireland, and he's small, and I wondered whether he wanted to grow quicker, and he wants to grow quickly, but he's not yet ready to do it as part of a bigger beast, because he's been there and he doesn't want to be burnt. So part of that is the relationship around can we work together, right? It's not a nameless suit. It's so that only comes from the direct relationship. That makes a really big difference. It makes a difference to the success of deals. It makes a difference to the relationships. It definitely doesn't have to be a centralised team. Yes, you need a team supporting, but I think it's a lot better if it's an integrated approach across the business. So in your business, right, if you all said, do you know what, we're doing really well, but we want to go and find great recruiters or great, talent development people in different industries. Right? You go network, you go and bring them into the business, you bring their book of business into the business. That's corporate development.
Yeah.
Right? But how many people have that structured as part of their either their salary or their remuneration? So their mindset doesn't go there. It's somebody else's job. It's not somebody else's job at all.
Yeah. It's very different, but I think it's also, not to kind of bring it back up, it's the same with DEI, like when, there's a separate function when in fact it should just be like a mindset, like a mentality, and it's like everybody's responsibility, right? It's like rather than just putting it over here and having these people lead, I think it's like just having that at the forefront, and it's the same kind of principle, isn't it?
It to me, that's the point about rounded human beings who've got all the tools to be able to achieve, not this is my specialty, you can't touch it, or all that kind of stuff.
So, as a leader, what do you do when you step into a new business and they have that function in place and the executive team have no idea really, or aren't in touch with what it is that this function is doing? Like, do you encourage everybody to work closer together, or do you get rid of the team, or how does it? How does it work?
I definitely don't get rid of the team. Yeah. Well, how does it work? So, a lot of the time, it's identifying where the immediate growth opportunities are. So I'm just thinking back through some recent experiences. I had one that was really funny, where I had a bit of the business that would not grow in the area. I was charged with growing the AI business, which ultimately I got up to about $400 million in a couple of years, and about 40% growth, so it was all right. And this one guy said, I don't want to do AI. By the way, he's now out in the market, I know, talking about everything he says is DEI and AI. But at the time, he said, I don't want to do AI. I don't need to, I'm selling infrastructure. So I said, okay. He said, I'm not really that interested. So he wasn't going to hire, he wasn't going to build a team, he wasn't going to support it. And he said, the only way you're going to get me interested is if you go buy me a company. He said, you're never going to do that, are you? Well, you can imagine what happened 6 months later. So you find sometimes where the path is strongest.
Yeah.
Other areas in the same job, I had amazing teams that were doing tremendously groundbreaking work, like mixed language models. This is a few years ago, and it was really groundbreaking to speak telco, pidgin Italian and English on the same model to 7 million telco customers, but it wasn't driving much revenue. So my job there was a different growth job. It wasn't to go and say, that little thing you're doing is not driving much revenue, stop doing it and go and do, the infrastructure thing that is driving revenue. It was more to say, this is amazing, groundbreaking work, you're passionate about it, how do we build the revenue stream behind it? Now it's doing 7 million interactions a month, it's worth billions and billions, and one of the top tech firms in the world is calling it out in their annual reports, right? So that was a different mentality about growth. And then the third thing would be, you don't have the right AI propositions or what have you to market, so how do we take those to market? So it was different flavours at different times, and I think that's the experience thing, which is, it's not like, here you go, I do have a playbook, which is, I do these three things. It's not like you're going to get all of it all at once in all places. It's kind of where you apply it over a period of time.
Understanding where the gaps are and then having that as the kind of priority.
Yeah, and being receptive to the market and to the organisation and to the culture and all those other things. Obviously, there's generally a bit of a brief as well, but what I found is that approach is, it's always outperformance on growth. It's always been the fastest growing bit of the business. It's always been super profitable, and it's always had really happy teams. So for me, that's been the consistent.
So with those three areas that we have discussed, of course, across different organisations, I can imagine that they're applied very differently, from like startup to scale up, enterprise. How do those different kind of environments affect those factors, those like pillars of growth?
Yeah, do you know what? The more I go on, the more I find it's unusual that people work across those different types of firms, and I've done both of them. So in the enterprise side, on large companies, I'm often seen as more of the entrepreneurial, more of that challenger mindset. I think it probably comes across from this conversation, but I am able to you have to navigate the politics there, which can be draining, but you've got to find the enjoyment of it. There you do have to have a lot more emphasis on communication and about communicating the vision and all of the pillars of communication, because it's a large number of people. I mean, I've had at one point, I think, 5,000 or 6,000 people working for me, so that was much more an exercise in communication and being consistent, and I had to rein myself in with the innovation to be much clearer and crisper on fewer messages there. And then so it's more about inspirational and executing with discipline. So that's kind of large companies. Small companies, I love small companies, but they're exhausting. I mean, it's all about pace, energy, this environment of family that is really important. I think small companies, you have to operate like a family, and everything that happens in the family, you fall out, you have disagreements, you come back afterwards, you sit around at dinner, you break bread together, and that kind of helps sort things out. You have to have a scrappy mentality. You have to have a mindset to hustle to find things, and not everything. And capital's not easy, and cash isn't easy as well. So I love all of that as well. But what I find is really weird is I kind of go big company, small company, big company, small company. And then the other one that I've spent a lot more time with in the last few years is investors as well, where you have to be a lot more commercial in terms of communicating a lot more of commercial ways. So I think you've probably got it from this conversation, is that what I talk about is quite passion and purpose based, but it's always got an end product. It's always got, I know what the financials behind it are and why we're driving it and where it's going and, all that kind of stuff. I find not a lot of people don't do that. They either do the rah-rah stuff or they do the commercial stuff, not both. So with the investors, it's much more leading with the commercial and then talking about the rest of the things we've talked about as the ways, the growth levers that are going to be used to execute on that. So it's different things, but I really like the mix. I've done all of them, and at different times, you play different cards to meet those audience needs and drive the growth in those areas.
And it's interesting as well because obviously, different environments, different things apply, but also what you can take from, startup scale up, moving into more of moving into the enterprise world, like there's, I guess, like transferable skills that you can bring with you to like inject new energy or approaches, whatever it might be as well, which is always quite interesting, like having that balance.
Yeah, it is a balance. It really is. You're right. I mean, it's people at some points in the enterprise environment want that. They say, we want that startup scrappiness. And then what happens is they often acquire, but create an environment or have an environment where the principals of the company they acquire don't want to work. So they don't adapt to the startup, and there's a lot of ego that goes on there. So creating those environments that can go both ways is important, because I think it's rare to drive the growth that I've driven in the way that I've driven it in different environments and in different countries. So anyway, that's my perspective on it.
And I mean, you've pretty much done it all. Dipped your toes into all the areas.
I definitely haven't done
well, a lot anyway. But like looking forward, what is next for you?
So I'm loving Renew. I mean, I set Renew up as a kind of little advisory business, and we've done some investments, and I talked about it was really good. Really, I think I want to go into a big AI growth activity. I think we're at that point in the market where there's a lot of, we're getting beyond the hype, and now it's okay, now we need to drive some real growth, some real commercial performance, we need to do it internationally, we need to do an amazing next gen team, cultural focus, that's what we want to do. And that's what all my career's been leading up to, really, is doing that kind of stuff. So I feel like I want to go and do one of those. I want to do it with amazing investors. I want to do it with amazing team, and I want to do it with amazing partners. And if that came around, then that would be great. Other than doing the advisory and the M&A and work on that I'm doing with Renew. So yeah, that's probably what I would do in market.
Is Renew something that you plan to have ongoing?
So it's quite funny. We set it up as a business that I wanted to be like an old-fashioned family business. So my daughter, hopefully she'll never listen to this because she'll be so embarrassed. My daughter, I got shouted at my daughter, fair play, she's 17, she's just got work experience, and one of the biggest law firms, like, the new building on top of Liverpool Street Station.
Yes.
She's in there. I had to take her in yesterday. I was so scared for her. They've got Los Mochis on the top floor. I wanted to go for a cocktail, but so I'm like so proud of her to go and do that. But the idea with Renew was that my wife's entrepreneurial. She's amazing, but that if there was stuff that we wanted to do, we could always do it. Mm-hmm. We always had a vehicle to do it. That our kids and our families could also collaborate with us, so very much back to the talent principle, but on a broader basis. So that was how we set it up originally and how it is. But what it also means is that it doesn't stop me from have a go at one of these big AI growth things. And when I look at the market, I'm like, how many people have built 400 million AI businesses with thousands of people and 40% growth? Can't be many. Can't be many. How big is your book, Daisy? Come on, you'll know. So that's kind of the stuff that I'd love to have a go at now. The health stuff is really, really. I love the healthcare industry. I think there's so much opportunity there. I did loads in sports. Sports has been some of my coolest work, and I often talk to healthcare companies about sports fans of Liverpool Football Club and Chelsea. They look at me like I'm totally weird. I'm like, well, if you can market to 700 million Liverpool fans around the world, then engaging with 600 million diabetes patients, maybe they want to be treated in the same or in a similar way or recognized. So then they start to go, okay, I get it, and you are crazy. So it's those kind of parallels that I bring together. But yeah, that big AI growth thing, that's for me. That's the next step.
Hopefully something that we can
work
together on.
Come on, Daisy, let's get going.
And this is the last question, a bit of a side question, but I think it's always really good to kind of normalise across the industry. Maybe when things haven't necessarily gone to plan, or times where people have felt really scared trying out something new, or felt like out of their comfort zone or not prepared for something. Would be good to know from your side what the scariest moment has been in your career so far, and what you've taken away from that. Okay,
so I'm going to focus on the scariest bit. So it was really early in my career, and I was like this big shot. I'd been given a laptop by my company, and I'd taken it home for the weekend, and I was staying at some mate's house and they were still students, so I'd graduated and they were still students, and I'd left my computer lying around one night, and they'd played with the screensaver and everything else. So I went into work in the Monday morning, which was I think it was in a chicken factory in it was a horrible place. And the boss had seen the screensaver that had said something that it really shouldn't have said. And at that moment, I just wanted the ground to swallow me up and me never to work again. But what I took from that is, never ever take your laptop to your mate's house. Never do that, because you can never trust them. But no, that was probably the scariest. But yeah.
Or if you do, lock the laptop.
Yeah, just like that's what they mean about having a balanced lifestyle. Don't take the laptop home, because you don't know what your mates are going to do to it.
No, that's good advice, because the amount of people that work from home these days, even if you're working from home, you have some friends around, watch out. Put the laptop away. Yeah,
well, I probably had pretty juvenile mates at that point in time, but it wouldn't happen now. But oh god, can you imagine? I mean,
Not had your first job as well.
First job. Oh.
Well, look where you are now. So
Yeah.
That's it. No, don't let the setbacks get in the way.
Right, there you go. There you go. I'll come to you for a pep talk, Daisy.
But no, thank you for coming on. It's been really interesting to learn from you today, and I think no doubt, across my network, they'll get a lot from this conversation. As obviously you are looking for like a new opportunity at the moment, or if there is anyone that's just genuinely, interested in connecting with you to talk more on this topic, where would be best to find you?
LinkedIn is always good, or you can find me chasing around, my daughter's hockey team or rugby teams. Lost Watch is always a good shout. Yeah, Notting Hill one always good. Yeah, always good.
Perfect, thank you.